Welcome back to Fire Footwear, everybody. As always, I'm your host, Matt Frates, and this week we are talking leaders with sneakers. I brought a guest on this time to talk about this topic, so I hope you enjoy the interview. One of the things that I wanted to do on this content, podcast, YouTube, whatever it is I wanted to make sure that people who I call boots on the ground were able to have their voices heard through this content, because I feel like today in 2025 now, content is a lot of people for whom we can't really connect with. And so without further ado, I do have my first boots on the ground guest, who in my opinion needs no introduction. If you listened to the Sneak Diss podcast about a year ago, everybody should know who this guy is. And that is Microwave Mack, DeVante Mack, host of the Mackism Effect podcast and some other stuff, live from Japan. So thank you for taking out the time on your vacation, and welcome to Fire Footwear.
Hey, appreciate you for having me, man. We've been talking for a long time now. I mean, honestly, it made a very quick friendship, a great friendship, I might add. So yes. I'm happy to be here.
I just recorded something that's going to come out next week, or maybe on Friday. I can't decide yet for those of you listening. We're recording this ahead of time, but I talked about how content and making content isn't just for myself, right? It isn't just for I like making content. It provides connections. And one of the ways that this happens is you were a guest on Sneak Diss podcast, and I started listening to them, I don't know, a while back, but it was after I had started doing this, and I finally, somehow our paths converged, and you were on there and you made a statement that got cooked, for lack of a better term. And, but I'm one of those people who I try to follow everybody who is a guest on there if I can. Sometimes it's reciprocated, sometimes not. In this case, it was. And then I think we started messaging back and forth. And it turns out that two people who've never met, who live on the other side of the United States, have very similar interests that diverge from outside of sneakers to videography and podcasting and all that kind of stuff. And so it's natural that we would come on here and do this. And I think that you are the perfect person as far as boots on the ground are concerned, because you're like me. You're a regular person. And I say regular person as you and I both have day jobs. We have budgets to worry about. No team is making any of our content. We're doing this out of pure love because we love to do it, and we're learning the craft. And so I like having somebody on who can speak that language. I mean, Chris from Wear Tester certainly can too. He and his wife are basically doing it all themselves. But as far as people that are just out living the life, living the culture, you are the perfect person for this. So I'm very excited. And I want to ask you first, how is your trip to Japan?
Phenomenal, honestly. So just for those that don't know, I actually came here predominantly for Tokyo Auto Salon, as well as, stuff from, sightseeing to some actual religious activities as well. So been enjoying my time out here. I will say this, their resale out here is almost becoming Americanized. And I only say that in terms of pricing. Yeah, so that's been
It's getting more expensive is what you're telling me.
Yes.
It's okay. So I think that that's not surprising in the sense that resale is what it is. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
That kind of culture is not specific to the United States, although I think that the consumerism behind it, I think that the side hustle behind it, if you will, is kind of, I don't want to say exclusive to America, but we think about monetary things much differently than a lot of cultures, and especially in Japanese culture where there are so many other factors and other elements of living, loyalty, things like that, honor, that not that we don't do those here, but let me just say that if somebody could sell a pair of Union Jordan 1s and have to run over their grandma to do it, they would definitely do it here.
No lie there. And so what is cool still about pricing here, since obviously me and you are foreigners to them, we do get to take advantage of the tax-free. And regardless, from my experience here so far, you can always find a deal. A sneaker I actually almost picked up yesterday was the CDG Naomi Osaka Blazer. It's a sneaker I had wanted for a long time. Unfortunately, it was just a size too big. But yeah, $100 I would have got it for.
Wow.
Exactly.
Listening to you say that is bringing me back to the one sneaker con that I went to that I said I would never go back to another one because it just glorifies this culture of mass consumerism. And it is that type of sneaker living, which, by the way, there is no judgment here because, in my opinion, there are multiple ways to live the culture, experience the culture, and you should live it however you want to. I just knew for me personally that this was not the way I was ever going to live it. And that, of course, has evolved over time. But hearing that it's reasonable over there, it is a little bit refreshing. But again, it's always going to follow whatever the trends are at some point because sneakers has become this icon globally that has gone far past what started with Jordan Brand 40 years ago and even 20 years ago when things started to pick up after the pigeon dunk and all that. It's much different now. And so there are much more divergent paths within this. And it's inevitable that it's going to find its way to another culture.
Yeah, indeed. And, overall, though, like the experience here, just not even in sneakers either, just fashion in general, I will say hopping off the plane, like literally in an hour, like just riding on that train to my hotel, I was answering like, yeah, I'm a bit underdressed. So that was interesting.
Yeah, I would be yeah. I'm not an underdresser necessarily, but I mean, well, let me put it this way. I would probably do some research and figure it out, but I would probably feel the same way. Even if I intentionally made a point to try to dress better, I would feel underdressed.
Yes. But let me ask, have you ever had a chance to come out here or ever
I have not
thought about it?
No, I mean, it's on one of those life bucket lists. I've been very fortunate to travel through much of Europe when I was younger, so I have at least experienced much of like Italy and Greece and Spain and countries like that. So I have been very fortunate to leave this country because I think it's really important, and this goes far beyond sneakers. If you've never left the United States, you should at some point, if you can, in your lifetime, because you will find that there are elements of other societies and other cultures that are better over there. It just is. And then much like here, in many ways, there are things that we wish we could change. Same things in any other culture, right? So
absolutely.
It is a place I would like to go one day, maybe when my son is a little bit older and I'm not paying all this money for him to go to school. We can make it out there, but one of these days it will happen. So the reason that we're really here is because you asked me a question in a DM or a text, I can't remember which, and I kind of said to you, this is too good not to make content out of because it's a very deep question. And it's a question that in sneakers, I don't really hear all that often, at least not phrased the way that you put it. You asked me specifically who I believe, were the leaders in sneakers. Is that correct?
Yes.
And it's a loaded question because I think, and I'll let you go into it in a very general way because we're going to break it down in a multifaceted way here. But when you ask that question, what are you thinking in your mind, like just in a general sense?
Just to backtrack a little bit. So if you're in the sneaker space, we all saw the Twitter, the chick on Twitter. I can't even recall her name off the top of my head.
The complex lady, right?
Yes. Look, I ain't even gonna bag on her, nothing but blessings to her. But her kind of trying to appoint herself as a leader in sneakers, that's more so what made me think about that question, just due to the fact of like, I more so was thinking about it from the consensus of like, I don't even know who you are. So how can you be a leader? And like I said, I'm not even trying to hate on her. That's just me just asking a genuine question.
Yes. And I believe she got caught up, or at least somewhat veiled, had something to do with Sock Jig too, because Sock Jig has a lot of things to say on Twitter, which are his thoughts. He has criticisms, and he is one of the people who will actually say those criticisms. And I think that that's good because, look, no person, no industry is above reproach in that way. And if I've noticed, though, that people are so offended when a commoner comes at them, or they perceive it as coming at them when it comes to this kind of stuff. But that's where I kind of thought that you were headed with this, because that got a lot of play on social media. You heard it all over the place. But when I think about like the general state of where sneakers is, and I think about leadership, I think what has happened, and you can disagree if you want, but I think people think of leadership as visibility.
Can I ask you to expound on that a little bit more?
So if you were to go ask anybody in line at a sneaker release or whatever, who are the leaders in sneakers, they're probably going to tell you the people that they see on a screen most often. They're going to tell you that Complex is a leader. They're going to tell you that anybody that they see on a screen that they think is popular. Travis Scott, right? They might say he's a leader in sneakers, right? And that's what I think people initially think of. I think if you were to make the distribution of people who would be asked that question, the bell curve of it, most people would fall in the middle of personalities that they know, who they feel are influential in some way. But to me, the idea of leadership is completely divergent from any type of visibility. It goes well beyond that. And in some ways, it has nothing to do with how seen you are.
Okay.
But what do you think? Because that's just the way that I think that people think of it, but maybe I'm way off. Maybe the culture thinks of it much different. But go ahead. I mean, I'm genuinely curious because this is going to set the foundation for what we're going to ask later on.
Yeah. So I do like your thought process behind that. I could pretty much agree with everything you said. More so, my thought process of it as well is I kind of look at it like, how you said, some people might consider Travis Scott a leader. My thought process more so is, well, to be fair, I can't really think of you as a leader if you can literally just go and get whatever you want. And it's not even hard for you to do so.
So you think of it in terms of almost like...
more so boots on the ground type person.
It's almost like
somebody that covers.
The elite is excluded from being true leaders in the culture is what I'm hearing from you.
To me, at this point, yes.
Okay. And is that because... And I kind of agree with this. I think I've even said this too, because I think it was Michael Strahan who was on Complex, and he had this whole spiel about people who wear fake shoes. And I thought, dude, you made millions of dollars as an athlete. You have connections. You can do whatever you want. You can get probably whatever you want. And so there is a disconnect between how he views just the economy and how I view it and how I live it, because I don't have endless means the way that he would, or connections the way that he does. But by that point, though, there are a lot of people who do have connections who I would not consider in the upper crust of it. I mean, everybody has a plug, or hopefully. But I think what you're talking about is not having a plug, but just not having to worry. And therefore, the parts of the culture that are frustrating to the rest of us, like sellouts or backdooring, don't apply to these people because they're probably the ones getting shoes backdoored to them. You know what I mean? And so I think we're both kind of speaking the same language, because I think the people who are most visible probably fall into that category in some shape or form, but not all of them, because I think that there are people who are seen. Let's take like a Cousteau, for example, right? I don't see him. I follow his content. It's obviously very well produced and it's very safe content. Greg has said that before, and I agree. And does he have connections? Yes, he does. But do I feel like he lives it in a way that he can get anything he wants no matter what? I don't think so. Like, I think he still has some of the similar problems that we do. Chris from Wear Testers is the same way. He needs people to send him links to shoes so that he can grab them. So he's not living that life where everything is available to him. But anybody at Complex, Joe LaPuma, everything is available to him, right?
Yep. Brendan Dunn.
I would assume, right? And all the personalities that they generally tend to have on there, popular people, it doesn't apply to them either. I mean, PJ Tucker hasn't scored a point in the NBA and I don't even know how long, but he has the means to go out and buy any shoe that he wants, no matter how rare it is. And so but my point being is like, he doesn't live the culture the way that we do. There is no barrier to access for him whatsoever. And it's funny too, because like when you look at the general state of like sneakers, I feel like there are people who think that it's dead, and then there are people who think that it's fine, and that this is just an ebb and a flow in the way that sneakers is. And
so that point real quick.
Go ahead.
Quick.
Yes, please.
Is it dead? Is it alive? You know, I'm kind of more on the side of it is dead, but I've said this so many times. It's dead for the masses.
Yes.
That's what people are getting confused. There's a difference between, you know, people that have been doing this for quite a long time. There's a difference between, take me and you, for example, that entered it like pretty recently, but, you know, we're so heavily involved in the space that, you know, we kind of more so align with the guys that have been doing it for a long time. And then you have the third type of people that got into it just because it was the cool thing to do, and then they fell out of it.
Do you think there's a lot of people who have fallen out of it? Like, do you know anybody who was like, I do? And not because of resale. It was more because of life circumstance. But he and I got into it together. We were at Flight Club that day. And while he enjoyed that time, he's past that point. Whereas I've, in a very healthy way for me, because you said like we're both involved. It's funny because I'm not that involved. Although I guess by extension of like this, I am involved.
Yes, that's more so what I mean.
But like, even compared to other people, I'm not that involved. But I guess when your face and your voice is heard by other people, people tend to think that you are involved. I mean, I try to stay up to date on what's going on, and I try to make sure that my content is related to something that's going on. But also for me, and I don't know if you're the same way, I love the history. To me, going back in time is more fascinating than thinking about where we're going, because if we didn't have the past, we wouldn't have the future.
So I'm 50-50 with you on that, because I do care a lot about the history. You know, me being such a big fan of Nike SB, you know, I'm very big in history with Nike SB. You know, you could say the same with Jordans too, but also I do have a slight issue in terms of nostalgia. I feel nostalgia kind of hurts progression at times with sneakers, because, you know, I was having this conversation the other day with my co-host for The Old Head and the Young, Eddie, and I was telling him, you know, it's just crazy to me that some of these colorways, they've dropped about like 2-3 times. And it's like, when are we going to get something different?
Mm-hmm.
And I get it. Like that's the colorway that made the shoe so popular. I'm not knocking that, but I need to see something else.
Yes, there is certainly, I mean, Nike specifically, let's stick with them. I think they know what they're doing, because they know, they watch the chatter, right? They know what we're talking about, what we're complaining about. So they're going to put out product to make money and all that. Black Cement 3s are a perfect example of a shoe that I know where it fits in all of this. I know how important it is, because the Jordan 3, a lot of people say like the Jordan 1, well, it created Michael Jordan. Well, the Jordan 3 kind of saved the brand, because he was going to leave if Tinker Hatfield hadn't hit that home run with the Jordan 3. So the Black Cement is important for that reason alone. As a shoe, though, I've never been a big fan. Just never been a big fan. And I appreciate it, right? And that's to getting to your point of like the nostalgia. It's like listening to other podcasts. And again, this is no shade at other podcasts whatsoever. But like they talk about these shoes. Well, the bread ones are coming out, and it's like have to have. And in my mind, I'm like, I don't have to have it, right? I don't have, like they talk about it like my collection doesn't have it, so it would be incomplete if I didn't have it. I never got to that space, because again, I can appreciate it. But when I talk about what I want, it's what I'm going to wear, not what's going to sit in my closet that I can tell somebody one day I've got the 85 cut of the black and red, you know, like the bread ones. And that's just not the way I live the culture. But I think the Nike is playing into the people who live this culture. Now, from the other side of that, the white cement 4, I'm a big Jordan 4 guy. I don't have a pair of white cement 4s, and I want the pair that's coming out this year because I want them to wear them. You know what I mean? Like, it's not a matter of, oh, I didn't get the 2016. I wasn't there. So like, this is my first legitimate chance without having to pay resale for it. So I'm excited in that regard. AirTech Challenge 2, same way. Excited because they brought back and they gave us a quality item to go along with it. It wasn't just for the sake of it. But there are some that come out that you're like, man, they really didn't take the time to pay homage. Like the chlorophyll pattas. Like, I have a bid in right now for them because I love the Air Max 1 and I'm genuinely curious. Like, I'm willing to go the distance to find out if it's as bad as people say. And if it is, I'll say that it is. But it might not be, right?
Yeah, or one as well. The Lost and Found Jordan 1s.
Yes.
I absolutely do not care for that sneaker whatsoever. Like, I literally was telling somebody, if I can find the Jordan 1 LA to Chicago's and just wipe off all the purple and gold, because, I can't do that. That's good enough for me.
Yes.
Hey, I was lucky to find a pair, so hey, I'll take it.
And that, but see, I will say that, like, when we talk about leadership, like, a criteria is at least trying to do something different than what's already been done. And so maybe the aesthetic of the Lost and Found didn't appeal to you, but I genuinely appreciate that instead of just slapping another retro out there, which yes, is what a lot of people want, they actually went for a cool idea, right? The idea behind it actually was really neat. And can you imagine if you went into a mom and pop store and they just happened to have a pair sitting around, no matter how old it was, you're sitting on a piece of history. It's just when it comes to utility, it doesn't work.
Like, at this point now, I get more excited about presentation from a lot of these sneaker brands versus the shoes sometimes. Because, Adidas and Anthony Edwards, I felt that was one of the most perfect rollouts you could have done. And honestly, I think it raised Adidas stock just with doing the commercials the way that they did them. Or, Nike's finally starting to get back to it. The Devin Booker one, for example.
I'm a real big fan of that.
Oh, you like the shoe?
I do.
Oh, okay.
I do.
I'm not the biggest fan, but,
I do.
To each their own.
I'm a white guy, though. I can like a shoe like that.
Oh, I don't disagree. But I was telling somebody, I don't care for the shoe, but the rollout when it was first coming out, where he was just going around to different places and handing people the shoe, letting them play.
Oh, yeah.
I literally said in a video, that is all you need to do.
Yes.
I'm sold at that point.
Yes. Well, so the Book 1, the reason I like it is because it looks like a much more updated model of the Air Force 1. And the Air Force 1 certainly has its place in the pantheon of the history, but it's a dated shoe that's really difficult to wear, and it's really difficult to make hip or cool. But like, the Book 1 is both performance and it has a look, and that's why I liked it, because I thought it was reminiscent of something that you'd have before. And like, when you see the Forrest Gump colorway on it, you're like, all right. I mean, I could pull off that more so than I could pull off a Cortez, and that's just because it would look weird on me. But to your point, the Sedona colorway that just came out, he left pairs of shoes out in didn't he leave them out in Phoenix or leave them out in Sedona or something like that? And it was like,
just like them around,
which is cool, right? Like, that's cool. That's the way to do it. That to me is like leadership, right? When you think about how are we, because I think if we're going to go any further in this, the point that I think I need to make is that the reason why people like you say that sneakers are dead for like the masses, but it could be in trouble, is because we have to think about the future and what is our part in making younger people care the way that we care. That's the hard part. And Nike, Adidas, Puma, whoever it is, has to take a role in that, because they're the ones making the product. I can go to the local high school down here, and you could too, and tell people how amazing being in sneaker culture is, and they'll be like, so what? I got Crocs. I don't care. And how do you break that barrier, right? How do you get them to care of, I think I said it today, cool over comfort. They care about comfort more than they care about cool. I'm in my 40s. I should be thinking that way, not them.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with that at all. More so, I think it's uh, it's an interesting situation right now because take who they have like working with the companies as well. Like, I do think that they should have more employees that more so are the boots on the ground, like me or you, for example, because it's kind of hard for me to take somebody serious that has never actually had to go stand in a line and try to get a sneaker, who's actually had to search and go try to get a sneaker, and you miss here, you miss there, you miss here, you miss there. I need to see more people like that working for these companies because a I feel it's going to help a lot more with marketing in terms of like, well, hey, this is what we deal with on a regular basis when we're trying to acquire these sneakers. Maybe we should try something different to try and combat that. Or I've made this statement so many times. Why not just do pre-order? Everybody would do it. Hey, I'm willing to pay an extra $100 as long as I know I'm getting the shoe.
There's a lot of ways that the brands could regulate some of these things and have it actually be useful. But you're 100% right in what you're saying is in that like there's something that's missing right now
Yes.
in where we are, and that is happening within these companies. Now, I'm not sitting here telling you that somebody like me, because I have a YouTube channel or a podcast, should be asked what I think, but I do live this culture and I do love it enough that I have something to say about it. And so it's a matter of, hey, here's a sample. What about this? Right? It's not about like, here, go sell this for me. It's about, how does this work? And you have legitimate, real feedback for these companies. If you don't have anybody that's inside like that, and they will bring in people and say, like Frank Cook, for example, which I think is fine, right? I mean, he has been successful, so like bring him in to try to rejuvenate a brand that creatively that's been sort of in a rut. But again, he kind of falls into that category of somebody who's been there, somebody who's kind of been to the mountaintop. Whereas you have a ton of people, that are living this culture who would probably have some legitimate things to say that might actually be a good idea. And you talk about pre-orders. I mean, there's a lot of people who would go after a shoe. Like for me, if it was a matter of, oh, this is peace of mind for me, I don't have to worry about getting this. It's a convenience fee of like $50 or something like that. Absolutely. Sign me up. And yes, what would end up happening with that though? The pre-orders would sell out and people would, complain, but like there's ways that they'd get around it, but there's ways that we can make this better. And I think the leadership is lacking within the brands to make this really happen. I mean, if you watch any of Chris's videos from Wear Testers, the amount of videos he has that are like, I did a Jordan 5 today and 4 days later I did another one, completely different cut. What? Like how do it's like, how do the metallic fives and then those dumb gold ticket fives look completely different? The cut is completely different. They could not have been made that much different, like that much farther apart from each other.
Absolutely.
This is the leadership part. A person like him and so many people like him who say, no, this is the way that the shape is, right? Because if you're going to give me a retro, damn it, give it to me the right way. That's all I'm saying.
I don't disagree at all, my friend.
All I'm saying.
Yeah. And, so let me ask, just off the top of your head, who else would you say you would consider, like, if they say something, you're actually really going to give it some thought because you have that much respect for it in the community?
I'll be honest with you. A lot of the creators that I've met, I feel that way about it in some fashion. Like most of the time when Sock Jake has something to say, it's worth my time, right? Because he cares about the culture the way that we do. He doesn't present himself the way that the rest of us do, in that his content is so different, but it's introspective, it is critical, and it's also knowledgeable, right? So when he criticizes some of these folks, or not even criticizes, but makes observations that maybe aren't as flattering as these people would like, I take it seriously and I start to look into it, because I think it's very important to not just assume that voices that you hear and see on Complex and wherever know everything, or even giving it to you straight. And so it's people like him. I mean, yes, there are people like Greg from Sneak This probably would sit there and tell you he's tried to retire like 8 times, but he's been down the road in the culture. He's seen a lot. He has experienced a lot. And when he says certain things, it makes me think. I mean, that episode he and I did on history, there was a great back and forth. And it was like, he has a lot of knowledge. And there are people that I have met, again, that are living this culture that would have something to say that I think would be worthwhile. I'll tell you the people who I really don't take seriously. And again, if this goes viral, which it won't, but it's like, this is not a personal attack on anybody, but like, I don't care what anybody at Complex has to say. I just don't. It's I don't care what any of the celebrities that they bring in have to say. I don't care about what celebrity you bring on your pod has to say most of the time, because while they have great stories and that does sell and you get clicks, does that help the culture? Does it help move it forward? And I think somebody who's trying to move the culture forward by making you think a little bit differently, or bringing you a perspective that maybe you wouldn't think of like this, to me, I think that that's worth listening to. But honestly, man, a lot of the content that's out there, if we're talking about sneaker content as a whole, a lot of it's lacking for me, because a lot of it fits the same mold. What have you picked up? What have you worn? What's in your collection? What's fire and what's not fire? And to me, if there are 15 different podcasts that all talk about that stuff, then how do you differentiate yourself, and how does that move the culture forward? Again, not a personal attack on anybody. It's just one of the reasons why I got into sneaker content in the first place.
I got you. And, I feel me and you kind of got into it for the same reasons as well, because take my show, Drinks and Kicks, I just wanted to start something. And I tell you all the time, it's kind of a spin off of LeBron's The Shop. I mean, it's pretty blatant what I'm trying to do. But, I more so started it just because I wanted to talk with people I had met, or, who knows how far it'll go, but just talk with people in general just about sneakers and kind of just whatever they had to say about sneaker culture. But, some people that I myself take serious / don't take serious, I agree. Complex guys, I don't really take too serious. I mean, I do think Joe Puma, Brendan Dunn are cool dudes.
Sure.
I do
Again,
that, but I just I can't really take everything you say serious, because like we already established earlier, they can get whatever they want practically.
but they're also attempting to do something else, right? Complex is, even if you go into the content game, right? Complex, I say this a lot to people about like Pat McAfee or Dan Le Batard or whatever like sports show. They're like, man, it's so well crafted. The people you don't see behind the camera are what's making that show what it is. And it's dozens of people, right? Whereas it's we just do not have that. You and I do not have that. Sock Jig does not have that. Greg and them do not have that. How many times has he said, is the camera on? Right? He's got to do that work for himself.
Exactly. Yeah. Or, another few that I do actually, I really enjoy listening to them. The girls that run Sneaky League. And I feel it's just good to hear a woman's perspective in sneaker culture, because, I've always said too, they definitely get a lot of knock, women in general in sneaker culture, because it has changed over the years. But way back when, I mean, you remember, women's pairs were not that quality for a long time.
And they were scarce too.
So it has changed. Yes, it has changed drastically. And, those three, what they do, for one, I'm a big fan. I mean, I've said this numerous times. I'm a big fan. Really like what they're doing. Was glad that they actually checked that girl that was talking crazy. But yeah, so I'm wishing them nothing but the best, and I could honestly consider them leaders. Beamer Williams is another one I could consider a leader.
Yeah, he was somebody I was
But
thinking
I mean,
about.
he's been in the game. Yeah, he's been in the game for so long. It's kind of hard not to consider him a leader.
But I think that
uh,
if I
yeah,
may, a criteria that I think
yeah,
is
go
important
ahead.
here, that I think these people are fitting the mold, right, is are they making you think and not just take something at face value? And I think that's important. There's a woman who I follow on Instagram, TJ. I can't remember like what her content is called, but she talks about financial stability in the sneaker game and how there are so many people who don't have financial stability, and yet they're constantly buying and constantly complaining about things. And I think that that's making people think about their life in this culture a different way. To me, that's leadership. Beamer Williams, right? Making you think about different aspects of the culture in a different way and not just saying, this is fire, making you think, is this really fire? And I think that's important. That's leadership. Sneaky Leak, them going at somebody, even a woman in this space, to talk about how things really are being perceived right now. That's leadership. Leadership isn't always doing the good thing. A lot of times you're a leader when people don't like you. That's what makes you a leader, because you are unpopular for doing something that is rocking the boat, not just for the sake of rocking the boat. Like when I ask questions, and I've gotten a lot of hate for asking questions, like I did a video on StockX and them not knowing whether things are fake or not. And man, a lot of hate. And I'm like, man, there are StockX stands out there? Like, I'm sorry. If you can't get behind the idea that you can question these people that are just saying, yes, wink, wink, believe us. That's you can't do that. You cannot just live in this culture and just like assume that everything's on the up and up all the time. And I think true leadership is saying something when people don't want you to say it.
I mean, hey, at the end of the day, I mean, we both know in this game, you're always going to be the villain to somebody.
Well, you are. It's a different level of leadership, like, or villainry. There are people who want to be villains, and then there are people who naturally become villains because, like, Sockchick is almost going through his villain era right now, but I don't think it's like a heel turn. I think it's because he is willing to say something that is counter to what people want to believe. Like, people want to believe things. Like, if there's something that triggers me the most, it's when people complain about sneakers and not getting shoes. And I always think, if you knew simple math, supply and demand, you'd understand that even if everything was on the up and up, you still wouldn't have a chance, especially if something that's super, super hype.
Oh, yeah.
They make 150,000 pairs, which is a lot, and 1 million people go after it. Look, the odds are just not in your favor.
That's like a 1 in a million chance at that point.
And they complain, oh, sneakers sucks and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, are there things about it that suck? Yes. But think about it a little bit more critically. I like the names that you put in there. I mean, there's a lot of people who you could consider leadership, but I do believe that most of the leaders are not as visible. Like even Bima, right? He could be considered a leader, but as you said, he has so much in this game already. And so it's easy for him to be listened to. It's easy for him to have an opinion. I think that it's more likely that somebody who you've never heard of, and I mean, even think about it this way, somebody who starts at the bottom and works their way up. And I think that that's pretty awesome. And that means that people are following your lead, that you're doing something that is at least somewhat resonating with people. But I still think there needs to be the element of anybody can manage. Not everybody can lead. And I think if you're unpopular because you're willing to do something that is counter to what everybody's just telling you that you have to do, that I think is the key ingredient that is missing from a lot of content today. And I just also want to say, I am not a leader in this. And because if you're going to say that later on, I'm not.
Okay, so I was actually going to ask you about that. So I actually don't consider myself a leader in the space either, nor have I ever really wanted to be. Because, I actually just had a conversation about this with somebody, and I told him, look, my goal is just to make sure, hey, if I literally quit doing sneaker content tomorrow, I am content with what I did, especially for my city. I worked with practically everybody I wanted to work with, so I'm continuing to still do so. I made a lot of great friends, a lot of great connections. That is all I really cared about. Now, of course, that comes from me being into too much stuff to continue doing sneaker content full time.
That's fair.
I just have the capacity for it because I like too much stuff. But at the same time, if you want to consider me a leader, to the viewers, if you want to consider me a leader, cool. Just know there's people that have been doing this not only longer than me, but there's people that are doing this possibly better than me. I'm willing to say that. Heck, I've said it numerous times. This sneaker podcast, the best sneaker podcast out there. I'm man enough to say it. I mean, heck, I think you would do a phenomenal job, my friend. I mean, consistency, trust me. I wish I could have that at times, but I just like too much stuff to be that consistent.
Well, the other thing too is I think in content specifically, I think in sneakers too, mostly it's what role are you filling? Are you like helping anything? Are you providing any type of, I don't know, assistance, or what value are you providing? So when I came into the space, it was important that I do not what other people were doing. And again, I know I have to keep prefacing this, but I also think it's important. This is no shade at podcasts that are like this, but there are so many bros talking about everything podcasts. There are just so many of them. And yes, they all keep it 100. And yes, you'll never hear it's all unfiltered. It's all the same thing. But unfortunately, you can only have so many four bros talking about sneakers podcasts before they don't all feel the same. They're not adding value to the culture. And so I was like, well, I'm going to do this alone. And it's not easy. It's not popular because I'm not having a banter with somebody else most of the time. But that's where I feel like the value is, in that when the Red Sea parts and all of these people are done making content, there's a voice that's still doing this because he loves it. That's not necessarily me saying I'll be a leader one day. It's just I'm going to keep doing this because I like doing this. And I think the way I'm doing it is authentic to me, and it helps the culture in some way. And so I hope I can continue to do that. That's all that I have to say about myself.
I respect it, my friend. Yeah, I mean, I think pretty much we're along the same lines there. And at the end of the day, there's always going to be somebody that comes in and is looking to, surpass who all of us might consider the best to do this. Hey, might even be wanting to surpass us. I just tell, hey, if you can do it, go for it. I'm all for it. Now, of course, the slight competitor in me, I'm gonna make it tough for you. but
but
at the same time, hey, I'm everybody's biggest fan.
Well, there's a lot of podcasts, like my first Kicks pod, and Haas is doing a great job. I mean, we're completely different. Mm-hmm. There's no competition. We're doing completely different work. So like, there's no point in being that. There's no leadership in being that competitive that you hope somebody else fails, and that's just ridiculous. Exactly. Which is why, like, a lot of people feel like, oh, I don't want to work with this person, but it's like, why not? There's nothing harmful with collaborating. Again, you're taking two people or a group of people who like the same thing, and you're having a good time talking about something that there's mutual interest in. It's just, to me, like, if somebody says, hey, do you have time? It's like, hey, I'll make time, as long as you don't waste it, but I'll make time. And I think it's important. Like, it's not about, oh, I'll grab some listeners or viewers from them or whatever. It's more about like, hey, this will be a cool opportunity. Why did I ask Chris to come on here? Because I genuinely think what he's doing is amazing. And he basically offered. So it was kind of like, oh, okay. It was not like, oh, great, this is going to be awesome for me. I don't even care how many views there were. Don't care how many subscribers I got. It was a great convo. I was very proud of it. And that's all that mattered to me. But I have to ask you one last question before we kind of wrap some things up. And it's a tough question. Does sneakers need a leader at all?
I would honestly say I don't think it does. But if there is one, I'm not opposed to it.
Okay. So this leader does this need to be a singular person? Are we talking like 80s era Hulk
No.
Hogan, or are we talking like, a faction?
Honestly, I think you need more than one person because you need people that can cover almost all avenues. Because, I mean, me and you can't really speak for women in sneakers.
No.
That would be ludicrous of us.
And I would not try. I would actually love
Exactly.
to have a woman on here who's in the culture. It doesn't have to be a creator, but somebody who lives it, who doesn't get the shine. Because
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. Hey, I tell people all the time, one of my big goals for Drinks and Kicks, I always try to make sure I have a woman guest on the show.
I think it's good.
Just because I don't want to have a whole bunch of dudes talking about sneakers.
There's already a lot of that.
Kind of boring. Exactly. It gets boring after a while.
Yes. And that's another reason why I keep my stuff to like 15 minutes, because I would be boring after that. So how do I feel about this? I don't know. Like, I think that leadership is going to happen at multiple levels. And I told you earlier that if the culture is going to survive and thrive into the future, it's people like us that have to make it happen. And it's not a matter of like indoctrinating people against their will. It's a matter of having these connections like this. Or last year, I had a lot of people ask me to get them things because their kid wanted it. They had no idea. And that kind of gets them percolating and gets them involved a little bit, like, oh, what's this all about? And I think that's a good way to do it too. Like my son likes it because they're cool, right? They're fun to look at. It's not a matter of this is what we do, son. It's a matter of I wear stuff and he goes, oh, I like that. And then we wear them together. And that doesn't mean he's going to be like a sneakerhead when he grows up, but that's how you do it at like a grassroots level. Or the kid who walks my dog asks me about a pair of shoes that I have on and he's like, you like shoes? And it kind of gets into a conversation, right? And those are little micro transactions that take place that add up, that aggregate to a larger effect. And there are always going to be loud voices in the room. There are always going to be people who feel like their opinion matters more. And God bless you, truly. But I can say for me, my opinion doesn't matter any more than anybody else. I say this a lot. I'm no influencer. I genuinely like making content. I like sneakers, and that's where we're at. And here we are. So I think we both are kind of mostly in agreement on some things. And I'd love to know, those of you listening or watching, if you're watching on YouTube, you can let us know down in the comments who you think are true leaders in the space, or if we even need them at all. And if you are listening, you can call the Fire Footwear voicemail, area code 202-643-9170. Give us your opinions. Give us some stories. DeVante, it was wonderful talking to you, my man. I'm glad we took out the time. And I think there's a lot of meat on the bone here for some future collaboration, so I hope you're up for that.
Oh, of course, man. Anytime.
Before you go out, though, I did make mention to you and microwaving sneakers. So can you educate some of the people listening to me that maybe are not aware of this appearance that got you a lot of fame? I will say every time I share some of your stuff, I get messages, does he still cook his shoes? So
yes, I still do that. So how it started was my favorite shoe is actually the Nike SB Janowski, Stephon Janowski.
Yep.
And they are a very tough shoe to break in. So I started doing it with those because, keep in mind too, I do it when the shoe is freshly new. They haven't even touched the ground yet. So, because there was a lot of misconception, like, hold up, are you wearing these and then putting them in the microwave? I'm like, no, like literally before they even touch the ground, that's when I do it. Because you're trying to get them to stretch out, essentially, just to make it easier to break in. But, when I did it with the April Dunks, I didn't know that swoosh was essentially aluminum foil.
My man, I'm not going to lie. When I heard that, I thought this guy needs to have his head checked because you don't hear that very often. I've never heard that before. And I was like, man, what is wrong with this guy? Like, that sounds so weird. But I was also laughing at the same time. And I think you were able to you don't take yourself too seriously. At least I don't think so. And so you took what they had to offer. You got roasted or cooked on social media, and you went on with your life and you went on with your business. And I kind of like that
Oh, yeah,
about you.
but
So
yeah, honestly though, it was cool though. A lot of people actually hit me up and they were telling me like, oh yeah, I've actually heard of this trick before. I just didn't think anybody actually did
pioneer,
it.
trailblazer, whatever type of whatever accolades you'd like to put on yourself, I think you should. Also, before we get out of here, could you plug your stuff for us, please?
Yes. So if you want to follow me, pretty much all my socials are across the board. At Real Mackism. That is Real Mackism, ISM. And then you can also follow Divergent Being Media Co. or Divergent Being Co.
Well, I will make sure to link those in the show notes below and maybe even pin a comment for you. My man, it was great to talk to you. For everybody else, as I always say, I hope this finds you well. I hope this finds you safe. And me and Microwave Mac will talk to you next time. This is Fire Footwear. And there you have it, my interview with DeVante about leaders in sneakers. Who do you think are some of the leaders in sneakers, and do you think that we need them? Let me know. Follow me on Instagram at Fire Footwear Pod. And of course, you can always call the Fire Footwear hotline, area code 202-643-9170. Hope this finds everybody well. I hope this finds everybody safe. And I'll talk to you next time. The opinions and viewpoints expressed on Fire Footwear are those of Matt Frates and his guest, and not necessarily those of the Matty Ice Media Network. Fire Footwear is exclusively owned by Matt Frates and is brought to you by the Matty Ice Media Network.